Edward Ashworth did not pace. Pacing was what men did when they had not yet decided. He had decided everything. He decided breakfast at 7:30, correspondence before 10, and refusals before noon. Because refusals, he had found, were best delivered in daylight, when the light made them feel less like endings and more like information. The 9th was Lady Cordelia Vane. She arrived in a carriage the color of old cream, accompanied by her mother, who smelled of powder and quiet desperation. Lady Cordelia was composed in the way china is composed, smooth, cool, and capable of shattering if you held her wrong. She sat in Edward's drawing room with her hands folded and her eyes doing precisely what society had trained them to do, nothing unexpected. He served tea. He asked her about the season. She answered. He asked about her interest in music. She answered. He asked whether she had read anything recently that had surprised her. She said she had not been surprised by anything in quite some time. He believed her. He thanked her for the visit. He walked her to the door himself, because he was, above all things, a man who finished what he started. Her mother's smile went rigid at the edges. The carriage left. Edward stood at the window and watched it disappear around the bend in the road. 9, said a voice from the hallway. He did not turn around. You were counting, he said. Someone has to. Cecily Fairfax came into the room the way she came into every room, without permission and without apology, which were the two things she shared in common with drafts and bad news. She was carrying a book, which she set on the table without looking at it, and a cup of tea she had apparently made for herself from his kitchen without asking, which she held like she owned it. Lady Cordelia seemed very sensible. She did. You hated it. I found it uninspiring. Cecily sat in the chair that Lady Cordelia had just vacated and pulled her feet up under her in a way that would have made every woman in the previous 9 visits faint with horror. You find everything uninspiring. You found the Earl of Pemberton's fireworks display uninspiring, and he spent £400 on it. It was loud. Fireworks are supposed to be loud. Then we disagree about fireworks. She gave him the look. It was a specific look. It involved her chin tilting slightly down, and her eyes going very level and still. The way water goes level and still right before you realize it is not a pond, it is a river, and you are already in it. She had been giving him this look for 5 years. He had learned exactly nothing from it except that it meant he was being unreasonable, and that she had already decided not to argue about it. She sipped her tea. And he sat down in the chair across from her. This was the shape of his evenings. Not parties, not salons, not the social architecture his mother built and rebuilt around him with the patient fury of a woman who understood that a duke without an heir was only a title waiting to die. His evenings were Cecily, tea gone cold, books left wherever she finished them, arguments about things that did not matter, fireworks, breakfast, whether it was acceptable to use the word uninspiring about a person, which she maintained it was not and he maintained was accurate. He had not been given a choice about Cecily. His father had made that decision 10 years ago, when her parents died within the same cruel winter, her father of fever, her mother of something the doctors called the heart and that everyone else called grief. Cecily was 12. His father was her father's oldest friend. There was no one else. She arrived with 2 trunks and an expression that was not grief and not bravery, but something in between, something that had already decided crying was not going to be the thing that fixed it. She had been 12 years old, and she had looked at his father's enormous house, with its long corridors and its oil portraits, and its smell of money and history, and she had said, "It's very tall." His father had laughed. Edward had been 17 and had not laughed. He had looked at this small person with her 2 trunks and her decided face and thought, well, here she is then. Here she still was. Your mother is coming next week, Cecily said. I know. She's going to ask about Lady Cordelia. She is. What are you going to tell her? That I found the match unsuitable. Edward. She said his name the way you press a bruise, not cruelly, just to see if it still hurts. Lady Cordelia was intelligent, well-read, and genuinely kind. You turned down a kind woman. Kindness is not a personality. No, but it is a foundation for one. She set down her tea. 9 women. 4 years. At some point even your mother is going to run out of candidates. Then the problem solves itself. The look again, deeper this time. He held her gaze. This was a thing he had learned to do, to hold the look without moving, without flinching, the way you hold still in a current so it does not take you. Cecily's looks had current in them. They went somewhere. He had long ago decided not to find out where. What is wrong with them? She said. Nothing is wrong with them. Then what is wrong with you? He considered the question. Outside, the light was doing the thing it did in October, going golden and long, pouring through the old windows in bars that made the dust in the air look deliberate, like the house was full of something slow and held. He had grown up in this light. He knew every inch of it. "I do not know how to explain it," he said. This was true. It was also the most he had said on the subject in 4 years. Cecily knew this. He watched her register it, a small shift, something behind her eyes that was not pity and was not satisfaction, was something with more patience in it than either. "All right," she said. She picked up her book. He picked up his correspondence. The light moved across the floor until it was gone, and neither of them spoke again, and the room held them the way it had held them for 5 years, like it had made room for this, like this was simply what the room was for. He did not think about why that felt. In some way he did not examine, like the most comfortable thing in his life. He was very careful not to think about that. His mother arrived on a Thursday with 3 trunks, 1 lady's maid, and the kind of determination that has been compressed over many years into something that no longer needed a face to show itself. She swept through the entrance hall of Ravelstone House like weather. She kissed Edward on the cheek. She kissed Cecily on the cheek. She looked at them both in a way that contained something, but if you asked her what she would tell you, she was simply glad to be here. She asked about Lady Cordelia at dinner. Edward told her it was unsuitable. His mother put down her fork. Not loudly. The fork simply stopped moving, and the table was very quiet, and then she picked the fork back up and said, "Of course." 2 words that meant nothing, and everything. 2 words his mother had been deploying for 40 years. He had never found a response to them. Cecily was looking at her plate. "How is the house?" his mother asked. "Is the east wing still leaking?" "The east wing is dry," Edward said. "Cecily's room?" "Dry," Cecily said. "Good." His mother smiled. "Everything is dry." "Wonderful." Edward looked at his food. He had the distinct feeling of a trap being built around him very slowly, one ordinary sentence at a time, by someone who had been building traps his entire life, and had never once been caught doing it. He ate his dinner. He said nothing. His mother, that evening, sat with Cecily in the yellow parlor for 2 hours. He did not go in. He did not need to. Some conversations were not for him. He went to his study and tried to read, and turned the same page 11 times. Then he set the book down. He sat with his hands open on his knees in the lamplight, looking at nothing, and let the night move around him, and thought about 9 women and what they had all lacked, which was nothing really, and what he had lacked, which was, he was not sure, had never been sure, had simply felt it like you feel the wrong shoe, not quite painful, just wrong, just off, just not the shape the foot already is. He thought about Cecily putting her feet up in the chair. He stopped thinking about that and went to bed. In the morning she was at breakfast before him, which she never was, sitting with her hands around a cup of tea like she had been awake a while, and when he came in she looked up and said, without preamble, "I want to show you something." She slid a piece of paper across the table. He sat down and picked it up. It was a list. 7 names, each with 2 or 3 lines of notes in her handwriting, a handwriting he knew as well as his own at this point, that particular slant, that particular G. He read the names, he read the notes, he put the paper down. "Where did this come from?" he said. "From me. You compiled a list of women for me to consider marrying. Someone had to." He looked at her. She was watching him with the level eyes, the water before it's a river eyes, and her hands were still around her tea, and she did not look apologetic in the least. "On what basis did you select them?" he said. "I talked to people, I observed, I applied what I know of you, which is more than anyone else knows, which is a fact neither of us needs to say out loud." He looked at the list again. Number 3. A Miss Annabel Greer, daughter of a vicar, currently residing in Bath, reads Cicero for pleasure, and once told the Lord Chamberlain he was incorrect about something at a public event, and turned out to be right. He looked at number 5, number 6, number 7. He said, "These are good." "Yes," she said, "they are." He said, "Why?" She set down her cup. "Because you do not need someone soft. You need someone who will not be moved by you, someone who has opinions and keeps them. Someone who," she paused, and something moved behind her eyes, and was gone, "who does not go quiet just because you go cold." He was very still. She picked up her tea again. "Meet them," she said. "That is all I am asking. Meet them." He looked at the list. He looked at her handwriting, the particular angle of it, the G's, the way she made her T's like small doors. "All right," he said. He folded the list, put it in his pocket, poured his coffee. "Thank you," he said. It came out quieter than he intended. She looked at the window. "Do not thank me yet," she said. "You may hate all of them." He thought, privately, that this was a real possibility. He thought, also privately, that the thought of hating all of them did not disturb him the way it probably should have. He drank his coffee and did not examine that either. The first name on the list was a Miss Harriet Dow, 26 years old, living in Derbyshire with an aunt who collected maps and a habit, Cecily had noted, of asking questions no one had thought to ask yet. Edward met her at a small dinner hosted by mutual friends in the county. She was taller than he expected, with dark hair and the particular look of a woman who had been underestimated so many times she had stopped being insulted by it and started using it. She asked him, 40 minutes into the evening, what he thought was the primary failure of the English legal system regarding property inheritance. He told her. She disagreed on 2 points and explained why. He was genuinely surprised. They talked for 3 hours. She was sharp, well-read, and had the quality he had come to believe was rarest in the rooms he moved through. She was interested in things outside herself. She asked him about his land management. She asked about the tenants. She wanted to know whether the villages on the estate had schools. He went home in the carriage and sat in the dark and thought, well, that was someone. Cecily was waiting when he arrived. Not visibly waiting, she was in the library with a book. But she looked up the moment he came in, which meant she had heard the carriage, which meant she had been listening for it. "Well," she said. "She is remarkable," he said. Something crossed Cecily's face. Fast and small. He could not name it, and she did not let him try. "Good," she said. "Will you see her again?" He stood in the doorway with his coat still on, thinking about Harriet Dow's argument about inheritance law, which had been correct on one of the 2 points she had raised, and incorrect on the other, and about how he had felt when she was incorrect. Not superior, not dismissive, but engaged, like the wrongness was interesting, like wrongness and rightness were both things you could grip. "I think so," he said. "That is progress," Cecily said. She went back to her book. He hung up his coat and came and sat in the chair across from her and picked up the book he had left there the night before, and opened it to the wrong page and sat. The library ticked, the fire moved. She asked about the village schools, he said. Cecily did not look up. "What did you tell her?" "That we had 2 and were building a 3rd. She would have liked that." She did. Cecily turned a page. He watched her do it without meaning to, the way you watch something when your eyes have made a habit of a direction. She was reading something with a green cover. She had her feet up again. He looked at his own book. The second meeting with Harriet Dow was better than the first. She brought a pamphlet on modern drainage systems which she had read and annotated, and which she offered him with absolutely no awareness that most of the men she knew would have found this alarming. He read the first 3 pages in the carriage on the way home, and found himself wanting to argue with a footnote. He told Cecily. She said, "She sounds like exactly what you need." "She might be," he said. "Then say so to her." "I am considering." "Edward," Cecily set down her book, "what are you considering that is not already answered?" He did not have a clean answer for this. He knew it. She knew he knew it. This was the shape of their arguments. She pressed to the exact place he had no language for, and he held the silence, and she waited, and eventually one of them moved. "I do not know," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "That," she said, "is the first honest thing you have said about any of them." He did not see Harriet Dow a 3rd time, not from choice, or not from a choice he could articulate. There was no falling out, no insurmountable difference, no letter of rejection. The correspondence simply slowed, and then it stopped, and he found that he did not chase it, and she did not push, and the whole thing dissolved the way fog dissolves, not all at once, just gradually not there anymore. He moved to number 2 on the list. The second was a Mrs. Louisa Fenton, a widow of 31 with a precise mind and a dry way of speaking that reminded Edward of good wine. You had to pay attention or you would miss the point. She was in London, which meant a trip, which he made without complaint. Cecily could not come. She had a cold she was refusing to acknowledge and a doctor she was refusing to see. He left her with instructions she would not follow and went. Mrs. Fenton was excellent company. She talked about her late husband without grief and without performance, which he respected enormously. She had opinions about architecture. She had been to Greece and intended to go again. She asked him, on their second meeting, what he was actually looking for, because, she said, with the pleasantness of someone who has nothing to lose, she got the impression he was not entirely sure. He said he was looking for a partner. She tilted her head. A partner in what? he said. In the life. In the managing of a large estate. The raising of children if that came. The keeping of the long years that came after the novelty wore off. She said, "That is a practical answer." He said, "I am a practical man." She looked at him. It was a kind look. The look of someone solving a problem they had not been asked to solve. "Are you in love with someone?" she said. He said no. She said, "All right," in a tone that was the gentlest possible way of saying she did not believe him and was not going to make it an issue. He returned to Ravelstone on Friday. Cecily was in the kitchen when he arrived, her cold now a definitive presence she was managing with tea and willpower. She looked up when he came in, and her face did the thing it did sometimes when he returned from a distance. It rearranged itself very quickly, as if it had been a different expression a moment before. "Well?" she said. "Also remarkable," he said. But nothing. She is excellent." Cecily poured tea without being asked, and pushed it toward him. "You do not look like a man who has found someone excellent." "How do I look?" She studied him. "Tired," she said, "like you have been working very hard at something that should not require work." He wrapped his hands around the cup. It was warm. The kitchen smelled of bread and something she had been making, something with herbs. He had grown up with kitchens that smelled of nothing because no one used them for anything except direction. "Mrs. Fenton asked me if I was in love with someone," he said. Cecily was very still. "What did you say?" she said. "I said no." She nodded. She looked at her tea. "Good," she said. "That is, yes, good." He watched her. She did not look at him. "She asked," he said, in a way that suggested she did not entirely believe the answer. "Perceptive woman," Cecily said. Her voice was perfectly even. "I thought so." Silence. "The kind that has things in it." He drank his tea. "Is she on the list still?" Cecily said. "She is." "Will you see her again?" "I think so." He saw Mrs. Fenton twice more. She was, as advertised, remarkable. She was warm in the way stone buildings are warm. Not immediately, but deeply, reliably, once you were inside them. He liked her enormously. He did not pursue it. She wrote him a brief note, at the end, that said, "I think you are waiting for something you cannot name, and I think that is its own kind of answer." It was signed with her initials and nothing else. He sat with the note for a long time. Then he folded it and put it in his desk drawer and did not tell Cecily what it said. Number 3. Number 4. He met them. He was, by now, good at this. The first dinner, the conversation, the genuine engagement. Because none of Cecily's choices were people he could not engage with, which was the problem, in a way he was not yet looking at directly. All of them were good. None of them was right. And the rightness or wrongness had nothing to do with them and everything to do with something he kept not naming. Between number 4 and number 5 his mother came again. She did not say much this time. She walked through the house. She had dinner. She talked with Cecily for another 2 hours in the yellow parlor, and this time he stood in the corridor for a moment outside the door, not listening, just standing, and heard them laughing, a real laugh, and went back to his study. "What do you talk about?" he asked Cecily the next morning. "Things," she said. "My mother does not discuss things. She discusses strategy." "Then perhaps I am part of her strategy." He looked at her. She was spreading butter on toast with tremendous care, as if the toast required precision. "In what way?" he said. She looked up, met his eyes, held them exactly 1 beat longer than usual, and then looked back at the toast. "She worries about you," she said. "I tell her not to. Then she does anyway. That is the conversation." He said, "She does not need to worry." "No," Cecily said, "she does not need to worry." A pause that had shape to it. He said, "Number 5 is a Miss Annabel Greer, the one in Bath. I know who she is. I wrote the list. I am going next Tuesday." "All right. I would like you to come." She put down the knife. He watched the small interruption of it, the pause, the still, something moving behind her face and then not. "Why?" she said. "Because your assessments are accurate," he said. "Because you see things I miss. Because," he stopped, "because I find the evenings after easier, when you are there to tell me what you observed." She looked at him for a moment. Then all right. They went to Bath on a Tuesday. They stayed at a townhouse his family kept. They dined with Miss Annabel Greer and her father, a quiet man who let his daughter speak, which told Edward everything he needed to know about him. Miss Greer was formidable, not loud about it, formidable the way rivers are formidable, which is to say from a distance it looks peaceful and you only notice the current when you are in it. She asked Cecily about herself, not in the polite way, in the genuinely curious way, the way you ask when you intend to remember the answer. Edward watched Cecily answer. He watched her respond to the genuine curiosity with something that opened, some part of her that was usually contained, that came out when she was not expecting to need it. She laughed at something Miss Greer said. It was not her careful laugh. It was the laugh from the kitchen, from the library, from evenings when she forgot he was the Duke and he forgot she was the ward. He looked away. He looked at his wine. He thought about nothing. On the way home in the carriage, in the dark, Cecily said, "She is the best one." "Yes," he said. "She is exactly the kind of person you—" "Yes," he said. A long silence. "Will you see her again?" Cecily said. "Yes," he said. He was looking out the window. The countryside was black and shapeless, the road pale under the moon, the horses steady. He was aware of the carriage, the small space of it. Cecily on the other side, her face turned toward her own window. "She asked me," Cecily said quietly, "how long I had lived at Ravelstone." He said nothing. "I told her 5 years." She paused. "She said I must know you very well." He said, "What did you say?" I said, another pause, barely a breath. I said well enough. The carriage moved through the dark. He did not ask what she meant by well enough. He did not ask because he understood it completely. He understood it the way you understand a word in a foreign language that has no translation, not through explanation, but through the specific feeling in your chest when you hear it. "Well enough," he said. "I will write to her next week." "Good," Cecily said. The word landed in the dark between them and stayed there, and neither of them said anything else. And the horses moved through the night, and he kept his eyes on the window, and she kept hers on hers, and the space in the carriage that was between them was not empty. It was not empty at all. He wrote to Miss Annabel Greer. She wrote back. Her letters were the kind he read twice, not because they were unclear, but because they were very clear, and sometimes the clearest things needed the extra reading to settle. She was coming to London in November for a season she called obligatory and boring, in a way that made him smile, which he only noticed because smiling at correspondence was not a habit he had. He told Cecily. She was in the library, predictably, with her current book and her feet up and her tea. She said good, and did not look up. "You are not going to ask me what the letter said? I expect you will tell me what matters." She called the season obligatory and boring. Now Cecily looked up. Something in her face shifted, not much, just the edges of an expression she was not all the way choosing. "She is going to be absolutely dreadful for you," she said. "Dreadful in what way?" "In the way that is good for you, like a cold river." She looked back at her book. "You need someone who will call things boring when they are boring. You call everything uninspiring and nobody argues with you about it. You argue with me about it constantly." "I am not," she stopped, turned a page. "Meet her in London. Take her somewhere that is not a dinner party. Take her somewhere she can be herself rather than a candidate." "Such as?" "The museum, a gallery. Somewhere with things to look at and form opinions about. That is how you find out if someone is real." He considered this. He had been taking women to dinners and garden parties and drawing rooms, which were places designed for performance. Cecily was right. She was irritatingly, consistently right about these things. "Will you come?" he said. "To London? Your sister is there. You have been meaning to visit." She put her book down fully this time and looked at him with an expression that was not quite the level water look and not quite something else, but was in the territory between them. "You want me there to assess her?" "I want you there because your assessment has been accurate 6 times and I trust it." 6 times, she repeated. "You mean 6 women you did not choose." "I mean 6 accurate reads." A pause that was not about the words. "All right," she said. "I will stay with Clara. You can have the townhouse." London in November was the color of ash and cold running water. Cecily went to Clara's in Marylebone. Edward went to the townhouse and spent 2 days on correspondence he had been delaying, and ate dinner alone, and found on the second evening that the dining room had a quality he had not noticed before, that it was very large and very quiet, and that the space where another voice would be was shapeless and somehow present. He met Miss Annabel Greer at the British Museum on a Wednesday morning. She arrived in a coat the color of autumn leaves and immediately walked past him toward a Roman sculpture she had apparently been wanting to see for 2 years, and said, over her shoulder, "Come along, I want to show you something," and he followed her across the marble floor. They spent 3 hours in the museum. She had opinions about everything, not performing them, having them, the way you have a cough or a preference for a particular kind of morning. She was wrong about some things. and said so when he pointed it out and continued. She was right about others and did not belabor it. She had been engaged once, he learned, to a man who had found her too much, by which she meant too opinionated about rooms and paintings and what was worth caring about, and she said this the way you say a fact about the weather, accurately, without bitterness, as information. He thought, she deserved better than that. She thought he seemed more real than she had expected. She said so. He said, what were you expecting? Something more ducal, she said. Longer pauses. More authority about wine. He said, I have very little authority about wine. Good, she said. Wine authority is a warning sign. He wrote to Cecily that evening, not a long letter, 3 sentences. I understand why you chose her. She is not at all what I expected. She is very good. Cecily wrote back 1 line, then stop expecting and start deciding. He folded the letter. He sat with it. He met Annabel. She had asked him to call her Annabel after the museum, because Miss Greer was for strangers and she was no longer a stranger, twice more that week. A gallery, a dinner with her father and 2 of his colleagues, which was lively and argumentative, and the best dinner Edward had attended in years. He walked home afterward feeling something he could not name cleanly, something that was close to happiness, close enough that it startled him, close enough that he took note. On Saturday, Cecily came to the townhouse for lunch. It was not planned. She arrived at noon with Clara's cooked scones and the green book she was still reading and the expression she wore when she had been thinking about something for several days without resolving it. He made tea. She sat at the kitchen table the way she always sat, informally, occupying the chair like it had been made for her. She told him about Clara's new house, which she liked, and Clara's husband, who she liked less but had decided to tolerate, and a hat she had seen in a shop on George Street that cost more than the village school's weekly budget. He asked about the hat. She described it. Brown, with a wide brim, completely impractical, extremely distinguished. Did you buy it? He said. Of course not. Why not? She looked at him. Because it costs too much. I will buy it for you. Edward. You want it. That is not the point. What is the point? She was very quiet for a moment. The point, she said carefully, is that I do not take things I have not earned. He looked at her. She was looking at her tea. The kitchen was very still. You have earned, he started. Do not. She said it quietly, not harshly, like a door being gently closed. Tell me about Annabel. He told her. He told her about the museum and the gallery and the dinner. He told her what Annabel had said about wine authority. He watched Cecily's face while he talked, the small smile at the wine authority line, the way she leaned forward slightly when he described the dinner argument, the way she listened to him, the way she listened to books she loved, with all of herself. She is exactly right for you, Cecily said when he was done. You keep saying that. Because it is true. You said the same about Harriet Dow. Harriet Dow was right for you also. And Mrs. Fenton. Also correct. He looked at her. Then why? He said, have I turned down 6 women who were all correct? She met his eyes, held them. He watched something in her face gather itself into stillness, the specific stillness of someone who has an answer, and has decided not to give it. That, she said, is a question I think you already know the answer to. She picked up her scone. He looked away first. That evening, after Cecily left, he sat in the drawing room of the townhouse and tried to read, and could not. He put the book on the floor. He sat with his arms on his knees and his hands open and thought, for the first time since he was young enough that thinking about something clearly was still frightening, thought clearly about what he was doing. 9 women. A list. 6 from the list. All of them correct, all of them turned away, not because they were wrong, because something in him did not move. He had spent 4 years waiting to feel something move, the way a needle moves when you bring a compass near what it is looking for. He had felt nothing move. Except, he pressed his hands together. He looked at the floor. He did not finish the sentence. He could not finish the sentence. He had built very careful walls around the end of that sentence for 5 years, which was how long Cecily had been not a ward and not a girl, but a person in every room he was in, and the shape he came home to, and the voice he heard when the house was otherwise silent, and the person who had written the list, and who came and went from chairs she treated like her own, because in some way they had become hers. All of this house had, all of his evenings had, and he had called it guardianship, and propriety, and category, and he had been very, very careful. He sat with his hands pressed together and the sentence unfinished. He thought about the hat. He thought about you have not earned, the way she said it. The door closing carefully, not against him, but against something that felt dangerous. He thought, what does she think is dangerous? He thought, she is not afraid of much. He thought, what is she being careful about? He pressed his hands harder together and made himself finish the sentence. She is being careful about the same thing you are being careful about. He sat very still. The room around him was a London drawing room with unfamiliar furniture and the wrong kind of dark, not the dark of Ravelstone which he could have walked through without a light, but a city dark, lit from outside by lamps and life. He thought about Annabel Greer, who was remarkable, who was correct, who had said, come along, and walked ahead of him at the museum, and been exactly the thing Cecily had described, and been nothing whatsoever, that moved the needle. He thought about coming home from the museum and writing to Cecily. He thought about the letter arriving at Marylebone the next morning and Cecily reading it. He thought about what her face had done, probably, when she read, I understand why you chose her. He sat with that for a long time. He did not sleep well. In the morning he had breakfast and went through his correspondence and did not write to Annabel and did not write to Cecily, and did not think about the sentence he had finished the night before, which was a new kind of careful, the kind that has already admitted the thing and is now managing it. He stayed in London another 5 days. He saw Annabel once more. A brief lunch that was pleasant and easy and that felt, from the inside, like a door that was open to a room he was not going to walk into. She did not push. She had, he thought, very good instincts about rooms. He sent her a note when he was back at Ravelstone, honest and brief, that said he had valued the meetings enormously, and that any deficiency was entirely his own. She wrote back, I thought so. Good luck with it. He read this and laughed, a short, surprised sound in the quiet of his study, and then put the letter in the drawer with the others. Cecily was in the garden when he arrived home. It was a cold November afternoon with a sky the color of pewter, and she was wearing the coat she always wore in winter, dark green, too large at the shoulders in the way that meant she had bought it for warmth and not for looking at. She was cutting back the last of the season's roses. Her back was to the house. He watched her from the window. She did not know he had arrived. She was doing what she did when she thought no one was watching, moving through the garden with the attention she usually kept contained, giving it to the plants the way she gave it to books, fully, without the part of herself she kept in reserve. He stood at the window for longer than he should have. Then he went outside. She turned when she heard the path crunch under his feet. Her face did the thing again, rearranged very fast, the other expression gone. You are back, she said. I am back, he said. She looked at him, properly, the full look, the one that went all the way in. Well, she said. I ended it, he said. A pause. She turned back to the roses, continued cutting. All right, she said. Cecily. Not now, she said quietly. He stood on the path. The garden was bare and cold and full of the skeletal winter shapes of things that had been blooming 3 months ago. When, he said. She cut a dead stem, set it in the basket at her feet. Her hands were steady. I do not know, she said. He stood there. He let the cold come in. He looked at her back, the green coat, the careful hands, the hair escaping at the neck the way it always did. He said nothing. He went back inside. He sat in the kitchen, her chair, because it was the one that faced the window and the window faced the garden, and waited for the kettle, and when she came in 20 minutes later with the basket and cold reddened hands, he was already pouring. She set down the basket. She sat. He set the cup in front of her. She wrapped her hands around it. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the garden was gray and empty, and patient with the particular patience of things that have been growing a long time, and know that winter is not the end, but only a different kind of continuing. He sat across from her. He thought, I will not push. He thought, I will wait. He had been waiting for a long time already. He knew the shape of it. He knew how to hold still in it. The tea steamed between them. She did not look at him, and he did not look away. December was the month Edward learned what it cost to know something and not speak it. He had spent 5 years not knowing it, which was its own kind of ignorance and its own kind of peace. But now he knew, and the knowing changed the shape of every room. The library, where she read. The kitchen, where she made tea for herself without asking, and sometimes left the pot warm for him. The hallway where their coats hung side by side, his dark gray and hers the dark green, and where the staff stopped noticing that the coats of a duke and his ward hung like the coats of a household that had grown into itself over years. He was formal with her. He did not mean to be. It came out of him anyway, a defense he had not consciously chosen, this new distance, The please passed the salt politeness that he watched himself perform from somewhere slightly outside his own body. Cecily noticed on the third day. She did not say anything. She adjusted. She matched the distance with her own. And for a terrible week they were very correct with each other, across every table and every threshold, and he thought, I have broken the thing. I have broken the one thing in my life that was not broken. On the 8th day she appeared in the doorway of his study at 11 in the morning and said, Stop it. He looked up from his desk. You are being insufferable, she said, not in the usual way that I am accustomed to, in a new way that I find considerably worse. He set down his pen. I am perfectly civil, he said. Civil, she repeated, with a particular weight on the word, like she was holding it up to the light to show him what was wrong with it. You thanked me at dinner last night for passing the bread. You have never thanked me for anything. You have been accepting bread from me for 5 years without comment. I am attempting to be. Do not say considerate. I will leave the room. He closed his mouth. She came in and sat, not in her usual chair but on the edge of his desk, which she had done approximately twice in 5 years, and which communicated, when she did it, that the conversation was being conducted on new ground. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at him. I know, she said, that something has changed. He was very still. I know, she said, because I have been watching you be careful for years, and suddenly you are being careful in a different direction, and the only thing in a different direction is me. He opened his mouth. Do not, she said, explain your way out of it. I am not asking for an explanation. He closed his mouth again. I am asking, she said, carefully, quietly, for you to go back to the way it was. Whatever it is that you are managing, manage it without the bread thank yous. I can bear the rest. I cannot bear that. He looked at her. She was looking at him with the level eyes, but there was something underneath the level, something that was not water, and not river, but something that had been held a long time, and was tired. All right, he said. Thank you. Don't, he said. She almost smiled. Now you know how it feels. They sat. She slid off the desk and went to the chair. She picked up the book she had left there the previous evening. She opened it. He picked up his pen. They stayed in the room together for an hour and a half, and it was almost the shape of the old evenings. Almost, but not quite, because now there was the thing between them that both of them knew, and neither of them named. And it was heavy in a way that was also, he noticed this, registered it the way you register something without knowing why, strangely close to relief, like putting down a weight you had been carrying with both hands and realizing that the ground was there, solid, under you. His mother came again in January. She came, as ever, with 3 trunks and one purpose, but this time she came without the dinner parties and the suggestions and the careful questions. She came and walked through the house and put her things away and said, at dinner the first night, I am simply visiting. I am not here about anything. Cecily said, of course. Edward said, of course. They both knew she was here about something. She and Cecily had their conversation on the second evening. He was in the study this time. He did not stand in the corridor. He sat and tried to read and failed and sat some more. He heard, at one point, the sound of raised voices, not argument but emphasis, both of them saying something with weight behind it. Then quiet. Then his mother's laugh, which was the real one, not the social one. He did not sleep well again. At breakfast, his mother looked across the table at Cecily and said, You have been very patient. Cecily said, I have not been patient. I have been uncertain. That, his mother said, is a different kind of patience. He looked at his eggs. He was aware they were talking about something specific. He was aware he was present in the conversation without being addressed in it. This was a technique his mother had deployed throughout his childhood for things she wanted him to hear without the dignity of being told. Cecily picked up her tea. I was given a category, she said. It was very clear. Categories, his mother said pleasantly, are something Edward has made excessive use of. He categorized his father's pocket watch as a paperweight for 3 years before I made him look at it properly. I am sitting here, Edward said. Both of them looked at him. Yes, his mother said. You are. He put down his fork. He looked at his mother. He looked at Cecily. Cecily's face was, she was not looking at the table. She was looking at him, directly, with the full look, all the way in, and it held something he had not seen before, or had not allowed himself to see before, which was hope, small and controlled and held carefully, but there. He said, I would like to speak with Cecily. His mother stood. She patted his shoulder as she passed him, the way she had when he was 7 and had done something difficult. The yellow parlor needs a new curtain. she said, at the door. The left one. It has been fraying for months, and no one has mentioned it to me. She left. He and Cecily looked at each other across the breakfast table with its cold toast and its cooling tea. He said, "She told me." Her eyes went very steady. "What did she tell you?" she said. "That you have been, that you—" He stopped. He looked at the table, then back at her. "She did not have to tell me a great deal," he said. "I understood most of it already." "All right," Cecily said. Her voice was even. Both hands around her cup, the steadiness of someone who has been holding themselves very carefully for a long time. "I have been," he said, "extremely stupid." "You have been afraid," she said. "That is a kinder way to put it." "It is an accurate way." He looked at her. The morning light was in the room, the winter light, pale and clear, and she was in it, the way she was always in it. Not placed in the room but native to it, belonging in the way you belong somewhere you have lived long enough for it to live in you. "I built a category," he said, "because I was afraid that if I did not, I would—" He paused. The sentence had no clean ending. He tried again. "I have controlled everything," he said, "since my father died. Every decision, every year, every arrangement. And the one thing I could not arrange, could not put in a column and assess against a list, was the thing that was already there." She was very still. "The list," he said. A small sound from her, barely breath. "You wrote me a list of women to consider," he said, "and every woman on it was someone you had chosen because you knew what I needed. And you knew what I needed, Cecily, because—" "Don't," she said. "I have to say it. I know." She closed her eyes for a moment, opened them. "I know. Give me a moment." He gave her the moment. He sat and watched her take it, watched her breathe through it, steady herself. "Come back." "I was not going to tell you," she said. I have thought for a long time that my job was to help you find someone suitable, and that was the right shape of things. The ward helps the guardian. That is how it works. That is not how it works. That is how I told myself it works." He leaned forward slightly. "What changed?" She looked at the table. "Your mother," she said. "She has a particular way of asking a question that makes the answer unavoidable. She did the same thing to me for 30 years, he said. "She told me," Cecily said carefully, "that you have not been yourself since London, that you came back from there and something in you shifted. And she has been watching you for 40 years, and she knows when something has shifted." She looked up. She asked me if I knew what it was. "What did you say?" I said I thought so. He said, "And." She was quiet for a beat that was too long to be ordinary. Then, "She told me that she had been waiting a long time for you to look up from the ledger long enough to see what was right in front of you. And that if you did not, she was going to do something drastic, and she asked me to help her avoid the drastic." He said, "What was the drastic?" "She was going to tell you herself." A pause. Then he laughed. It came out of him unexpectedly, a real one, full of something that had been compressed for months, and Cecily looked at him startled, and then something in her broke open. Not a smile, something larger than a smile, something that was relief, and old tension releasing, and the specific expression of a person who has been braced for a door to stay shut, and it has opened. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. She looked at his hand, then at him. He said, "The category was always mine. You told me that." "I said," she corrected softly, "that I never agreed to it." "No," he said, "you never agreed to it." She turned her hand under his, held it. Outside, January pressed gray and cold against the windows, and the grounds of Ravelstone were frost-bare and still, the trees skeletal, the garden stripped and waiting, the whole estate in the patient middle of things that were not over, but simply resting. Inside, across a breakfast table with cold toast, two people held hands in the morning light, and did not say anything else for a while, because everything that needed saying had been said, and what was left was just the warmth of it, just the solid, unhurried fact of it, just the relief of two people who had each been holding one end of something for a very long time finally looking up and seeing who was holding the other end. He did not propose elegantly. He had spent 4 years declining women with the particular grace of someone who has had very good manners for so long they are indistinguishable from character, and he had imagined, in some distant theoretical way, that when the moment came he would manage it with the same composed precision. He had imagined, inasmuch as he had imagined it, which was carefully, which was rarely, an evening, a setting, a structured declaration. What happened was a Wednesday morning. He could not sleep. He had been awake since before the light, lying in the dark of his room with his hands behind his head and the ceiling above him going slowly from black to gray as the house came around, and thinking with the kind of clarity that arrives at 3 in the morning like an uninvited guest and refuses to leave. He was thinking about the previous 2 weeks, about the way things had shifted since the breakfast table, since the hand, since his mother's face at the door, which had been the face of someone who had been right for a very long time. They had not spoken about it again. They had, instead, moved differently through the same rooms, not performing, the opposite of performing, being careless in a new way. She had started a sentence at dinner 3 nights ago with, "When we go to Bath in spring," and stopped and looked at him, and he had said, "Yes, when we go," and she had looked away, and the sentence had stayed unfinished, but what it meant had been very finished. She had laughed at something he said about the frost on the lower field, and it had not been the careful laugh. He had started saying her name differently. Not the formal shape of it, but the one that had no performance in it, the Cecily that was just her name and nothing else. She had noticed. He knew because she went very still each time, a beat, before she answered. He got up at 5:30. He dressed without ringing for anyone. He went downstairs in the gray pre-dawn of the house and went to the kitchen, which was the only place that was warm this early, where the night fire had kept the heat. He made tea. He was not good at making tea. He managed it. He sat at the table in her chair, which faced the window, and watched the sky lighten very slowly from gray to a cold, bright blue, and thought about everything. He thought about his father, who had found this easy, who had walked into a room where his mother was reading and said, according to family legend, simply, "I think this has gone on long enough," and his mother had put down her book and said, "About time," and that had been the end and the beginning of it. He had always found this story implausible. Now he found it the most plausible thing he had ever heard. He thought about 9 women and a list, and 6 from the list, and Harriet Dow's inheritance law argument, and Mrs. Fenton's perceptive gentleness, and Annabel Greer saying come along at the museum, and every single one of them clearly and correctly chosen, and himself turning away from all of them with no reason that held. He thought about the handwriting, the particular G, the slant of the T. He thought about the coat in the hallway. He heard footsteps. She came in the same way she always came in, without ceremony, in the dark green wool dressing robe she wore in the mornings, her hair only loosely pinned, which meant she had pinned it herself in the dark. She went to the fire, and then turned and saw him. She stopped. "You are up," she said. "I made tea," he said. She looked at the pot on the table. She looked at him. She came and sat in the chair across from his, which was his chair, and wrapped her hands around the cup he had poured for her without thinking about the fact that he had poured it without thinking. She looked at the cup. "You poured mine first," she said. He had not noticed. He noticed now. "I suppose I did," he said. She was quiet. The kitchen held the pre-morning sound of itself, the low tick of the fire, the pale light coming up behind the frost on the glass, the house around them still and sleeping. He said, "I have been thinking." "Since when?" "Since 3 this morning." "What have you concluded?" He looked at her. She was looking at her cup. Her hands were still around it, steadying it. He could see, from here, the small scar on her left thumb from a glass she had broken 2 years ago in the library, an accident with a candle, and a startlement, and him saying her name too loudly. He knew exactly when that scar happened. He had been there. He knew when she had learned to ride, which was late, 17. And she had said she was going to fall and then fallen and said, from the ground, looking at the sky. Well, and he had looked down at her and said, "Yes, you were right about that." And she had laughed from the ground at his feet. He knew the specific quality of her silence when she was reading something she loved, which was different from the silence when she was reading something she was puzzling through. He knew the difference between her "I am annoyed with you" laugh and her genuine one. He knew that she always folded letters before she read them again, and that she kept receipts for books because she had, at 12, memorized some principle about accounting for what you spend, and had never stopped. He knew her. He had known her the way you know a house you grew up in, not by thinking about it, but by moving through it, by the body's memory of where the step is that creaks and where the light falls in late afternoon, and what the air smells like before rain. He had known her like that for years, and had called it guardianship, and had never once let himself understand what it was. "Cecily," he said. She looked up. "I cannot make the argument against it," he said. She was very still. "I have tried," he said. "Not recently. For years. There are arguments, you understand. I have been aware of them. The arguments of propriety and category, and what people will say and what it means and whether it is. Whether I am, in some way, taking advantage of. He stopped. I have held those arguments up and looked at them, and they are real arguments, and I want you to know that I have not dismissed them. Because if you tell me they hold, if you tell me that this is not what it is, or that you are not, then I will not. Edward, she said. I am not finished. You are, she said gently. You have finished. He looked at her. She was still holding her cup with both hands, but her eyes were. They were the way eyes are when you stop performing for them, when you stop holding them a certain way. Open, not the river before you're in it, not the level, careful water, but something past all of that, something that had been waiting behind the level for a long time, patient the way things are patient when they know they are true. I was 12 when I came here, she said. And you were 17, and you looked at me like I was a problem your father had handed you. You were not a problem. I know that. I did not know it then. It took me some time. She looked at the cup. And then I knew you. And knowing you was, she paused, chose her words the way she chose everything, carefully, and then fully. It was not what I had expected from a person. You are very different from how you appear, Edward. You appear cold and contained, and you are not cold at all. You are just private. And I was allowed to know the private version, because I lived here, because I was the ward, because I was the one category you were not careful with. He said nothing. I understood, she said, when I was old enough to understand it, that what I felt was not what wards feel. I thought for a long time that the solution was to be quiet, to do my part, to help you find someone suitable and to make myself useful and to be, her voice was even, but even had a particular texture to it right now, to be the thing that was here, that was steady, that was not the thing you wanted. Cecily. I built a list, she said, and I was absolutely certain when I built it, that the list was what you needed. 7 good women. I believed that. I still believe it. They were good women. They were. And you turned them all down. Yes. Not because of me, she said. I know you did not do it because of me. You did not know, and I was not asking you to. I was not waiting for you. I was trying. She stopped. I was trying, she said, to want the right shape of things. He looked at her. The morning was fully coming now, the blue sky brightening behind the frost glass, the kitchen filling with a light that was still pale but was no longer gray. What was the right shape, he said. You, and someone suitable, and me, in the East Wing. Useful. She said it without bitterness. As a fact, that was always the right shape. I kept it very carefully. But, he said. She looked at him. Your mother, she said, asked me, in January, whether I was happy. Not whether I was well, not whether the arrangement was comfortable, whether I was happy. A pause. I told her the house was very good to me. He said. She did not ask about the house. No, Cecily said. She did not. She set down her cup. She put her hands in her lap. She looked at him with the full look and held it, and what was in it was everything the level eyes had been keeping back. Not grief, not longing, but something much more specific. The look of a person who has been sensible for a very long time, and has recently become uncertain that sensible is the same as right. He said, Are you happy? She said, I have been very careful. He said, That is not what I asked. She said, No, I have not been happy. I have been here, and that is not nothing, and I have not allowed myself to want it to be more, because wanting it to be more was the one thing I had absolutely no right to do. He stood. She looked up at him. He came around the table and crouched down so he was level with her. Not a graceful movement, not a composed one. The posture of a man who is past concerned with how it looks, and said, from 2 feet away, You have every right. She looked at him. Cecily, he said, you have every right. You have had every right for years, and the category was mine, and you never agreed to it. You told me. You never agreed to it, and I was. He pressed his hands together. Here, right in front of her. I was afraid that what I felt was a confusion of proximity, that I had spent 5 years in the same rooms as a person who knew me, who was the only person in my life who knew the private version, and that I was confusing that for something else. I was afraid, he said, of being wrong about the most important thing I had ever felt. She was very still. I am not confused, he said. I am not confused about this. She looked at him for a long time. He let her look. He did not move. He stayed there, level with her, close enough that she could see whatever was in his face, all of it. Everything he had been keeping out of his face for 5 years, which was, it turned out, very simple, and very old, and very clear. Say it properly, she said softly. "Marry me," he said. No preamble. No architecture around it. Just the two words, plainly, like they had always been in the sentence he was speaking, and just needed to be spoken. She breathed. She said yes. And then she did something she had not done in 5 years of evenings and library chairs and kitchen tea and disagreements about fireworks. She covered her face with her hands, for just a moment, and when she took them away she was the most honest he had ever seen her look, which was, in a life of being looked at by people who wore faces, an extraordinary thing. "You are going to regret the bread, thank yous," she said. "I know. Society is going to have opinions. They always have opinions. It is the primary thing they do. Your mother is going to be insufferable about being right. She has been right, and she knows it, and she has been waiting 40 years for someone to acknowledge it. She has earned it." Cecily looked at him. The light came through the window behind her, the winter light, cold and clear, and she was in it the way she was always in every room she occupied, with the full authority of someone who has earned their place and stopped performing it. She said, "I want the hat." He said, "Which hat?" "The brown one, George Street." "Is it still there?" "I have no idea. You can find another if it is not." She said it without apology, which was how she said everything that was real. "I would like something I did not earn, just once." He took her hands. He held them, both of them. They were warm. He had held one of them, briefly, across the breakfast table, and had thought about it for a week afterward, had turned it over and over in his mind, like a coin found on a path that might be valuable, or might be ordinary, and you cannot know until you look at both sides in real light. Both sides in real light. He knew both sides. He said, "I will find you the hat." They married in October. Not a large wedding. Cecily did not want large, and Edward had spent enough of his adult life in rooms full of people performing at each other to last 2 lifetimes. His mother came and sat in the front, and wore her real face the entire time, which was something people who knew her well said they had never seen at a public occasion. Clara came, and wept into a very small handkerchief. 3 of the Ravelstone tenants came uninvited, and he let them stay, because Cecily asked him to, and because she was right. She wore the Ravelstone sapphires, not because anyone insisted, because she wanted to. She had looked at them the week before, in their case, and said, "They are very good, aren't they?" And he had said yes, and she had said, "I think I will wear them," and that was that. She wore her own face under them, the one without the careful layer, the one that had been there in the kitchen at 5:30 in the morning. After, when the guests had gone and the house was returned to itself, they sat in the library, her chair, his chair, 2 cups, a fire, and she had her feet up in a book and he had his correspondence, and the lamps made the room the color of old amber. He looked at her. He had looked at her in this room for 5 years. The angle of it was the same. The chair was the same. The book was different. She was different in a way that was only the one thing. The level eyes, when she felt him looking and looked up, were not keeping anything back. They were just her, all the way in, and nothing held. "Well," she said. "Well," he said. She looked back at her book. He looked back at his correspondence. The fire moved. The room held them. Outside, October was doing what October did at Ravelstone, turning the grounds gold and then letting them go, the way all things eventually let go of what is not permanent, keeping only what has grown deep enough to survive the winter. They had grown, he thought, deep enough. He picked up his pen. She turned a page. The Duke of Ravelstone had refused 9 women, and a list of 7 more, and in the end the thing that had undone him was not a candidate, and not a season, and not a strategy. It was a person who had lived in the East Wing for 5 years and made tea without asking, and put her feet up in chairs that were not hers and knew the private version of him, and had written him a list of excellent women and been, for 5 years, quietly, determinedly, entirely his. He had been, in the end, the last one to know it. She had always known. She was almost always right about things. He had decided to stop being surprised by this. He had decided to stop being surprised by a great many things, and to simply look at them, clearly, in full light, and call them what they were. He called it what it was. He picked up his correspondence. She turned another page.